The dawn broke cold over Dragonstone, though the island never truly knew warmth in the common sense. Steam rose from fissures in the black stone, mingling with the salt spray of the narrow sea, and the air carried that peculiar scent Peter had never grown accustomed to, sulphur and brine and something else, something ancient that seemed to seep from the very bones of the fortress itself. Peter Longwaters was not a man of great consequence. A distant cousin to House Velaryon, through his grandmother's line, bastard-born and barely acknowledged, he served as one of Lord Corlys's many scribes. His hands were stained with ink more often than blood, and he preferred it that way. The great Game of Thrones was for lords and dragons. Peter merely recorded their words and kept their accounts, invisible as the stones beneath their feet. He had been awake since the 4th hour, as was his custom, preparing the day's correspondence in the small chamber he shared with 2 other scribes. The castle stirred slowly around him, servants hauling water, guards changing watch, the distant rumble that might have been the sea or might have been one of the dragons in the lairs below. Through the narrow window, he could see the first grey light touching the jagged rocks that gave the island its name. It was the raven's cry that changed everything. Not the usual cawing of the birds in the rookery, but a single piercing shriek that echoed across the castle walls. Peter knew that sound. Every man on Dragonstone knew it. A black raven from King's Landing. In times of peace, such ravens were common enough, carrying the tedious business of realm and crown. But these were not times of peace, not truly. Not with King Viserys wasting away in the Red Keep, his succession a matter of bitter dispute despite all the oaths sworn years before. Peter set down his quill and moved to the window. Below, in the courtyard, he could see figures moving with sudden purpose. A master, grey robes flapping, hurrying toward the Sea Dragon Tower, where Princess Rhaenyra kept her chambers, guards straightening at their posts, a serving woman crossing herself in the manner of the Seven, lips moving in silent prayer. He did not need to read the message to know what it contained. By the time Peter made his way to the lower halls, the castle had transformed. What had been a drowsy morning had become something else entirely, a held breath, a drawn blade not yet fallen. Men spoke in hushed voices, their words swallowed by the thick stone walls. Servants moved quickly, eyes downcast, as if afraid to be caught witnessing history. Lord Corlys Velaryon stood in the chamber of the painted table, his weathered hands gripping the edge of that great map of Westeros, fashioned by Aegon the Conqueror himself. The sea snake had seen more than 70 years, had sailed around the known world 9 times, had built a fortune that rivaled the crown's own. Yet in this moment, in the grey morning light filtering through the high windows, he looked every one of those years. "Send for Prince Daemon," Corlys said, his voice carrying the rasp of age and salt air, "and summon Lord Celtigar." Quietly, Peter pressed himself against the wall as men moved to obey. He had no business here, not really, but no one had ordered him away, and he had learned long ago that invisible men learned the most valuable secrets. He kept his tablet ready, his stylus poised, the very picture of a dutiful scribe waiting for instruction. The painted table dominated the chamber, a massive slab of wood carved and painted to show every hill and valley, every castle and river of the 7 kingdoms. Dragonstone itself sat at the edge, a small carved dragon marking the seat of Targaryen power in the east. Peter had seen lords spend hours studying this table, moving pieces like players in a Sivas game, plotting wars and alliances and betrayals. Now it would serve its original purpose once more. Prince Daemon Targaryen arrived with the dawn fully broken, and he brought the smell of dragon with him. Peter had seen the prince from a distance many times, but never this close, never in such a confined space. There was something unsettling about Daemon, the way he moved, the way his violet eyes seemed to look through a man rather than at him. He wore black and red, as always, and Dark Sister hung at his hip, that Valyrian steel blade that had drunk the blood of countless men. "Where is she?" Daemon asked, his voice soft, but carrying an edge like the sword he wore. "The princess has shut herself in her chambers," Corley said. "She will not see anyone, not even the Maester." "She knows." Then she knows Peter watched as Daemon moved to the table, his fingers trailing across the painted kingdoms. For a long moment, the prince said nothing, merely studied the map as if reading the future in its contours and colors. "How did he die?" Daemon asked finally. Corlys hesitated. Even Peter, pressed against his wall, could sense the weight of that hesitation. The Raven gave few details. Peacefully in his sleep, they say. The Grand Maester was with him at the end. Peacefully. Daemon's laugh was short and bitter. And I suppose my dear brother, in his final peaceful moments, changed his mind about the succession, decided that his drunken wastrel of a son should wear the crown instead of his chosen heir. "The message came from the Green Council," Corlys said carefully. "Queen Alicent and her father have already crowned Aegon in the Dragon Pit. They claim Viserys' final words. They claim." Daemon turned, and Peter shrank further into his corner. "The Hightowers claim. My brother is dead less than a day, and already they move like rats in the walls, stealing what was never theirs to take." Lord Bartimos Celtigar entered then, breathing hard from his climb. The Lord of Claw Isle was not a young man either, and his ancient house carried more pride than power these days. But his loyalty to the Targaryens was absolute, stretching back to before Aegon's conquest, when his ancestors had bent the knee to Dragonstone's dragon lords. "Is it true?" Celtigar demanded. "Is Viserys dead?" "Dead," Daemon confirmed, "and the Hightower bitch has crowned her son in his place." Celtigar's face purpled with rage, but before he could speak, a door opened at the far end of the chamber. The men turned as one. Princess Rhaenyra Targaryen entered in silence. Peter had seen the princess many times over the years, laughing at feasts, riding her golden dragon Syrax above the castle, heavy with child, arguing with her father's envoys. He had never seen her like this. She wore black, unadorned save for the three-headed dragon worked in red thread at her breast. Her silver gold hair hung loose, uncombed, and her face was pale as milk. But her eyes, those Targaryen eyes, violet as summer flowers, were dry and hard as amethysts. She moved to the painted table without a word, and the men parted before her like waves before a ship's prow. Her hands, Peter noticed, were trembling slightly as she placed them on the table's edge, staring down at the carved and painted kingdoms that were her birthright. "They have crowned Aegon," she said. It was not a question. "Yes, Your Grace," Corlys said, and Peter felt the weight of those two words. Your Grace, not princess any longer. The sea snake had made his choice, had cast his lot and his fortune and his house's future on this woman's claim. Rhaenyra's jaw tightened at the title, but she did not correct him. Tell me everything. Leave nothing out. Corlys unrolled a piece of parchment, the message that had come with the raven. Grand Maester Orwell writes that your father died peacefully in his sleep 3 days past. That in his final moments, he spoke of Aegon, the Conqueror, and his dream, and that he wished for his son Aegon to. My father had no such wish. Rhaenyra's voice was cold, controlled, each word precisely cut. My father named me his heir before the entire court. Every great lord in the 7 kingdoms swore oaths to uphold my claim. This is theft, plain and simple. This is treason. Treason requires a sovereign to betray. Daemon said quietly. They will say Aegon is the true king, that a woman cannot inherit, that your father changed his mind at the end, that I know what they will say. Rhaenyra's hands were no longer trembling. They were pressed flat against the table, fingers splayed across the crownlands and the reach. They will say whatever serves their purpose. The truth matters nothing to the Hightowers. It never has. A silence fell over the chamber, broken only by the distant sound of waves against stone. Peter's stylus was forgotten in his hand. This was the moment, he realized, where history pivoted, where the realm's future hung balanced on the edge of a blade. It was Celtigar who spoke first. What are your commands, your grace? Rhaenyra looked up at him, then at Corlys, then at Daemon. Peter could not read what passed between the princess and her uncle husband in that moment, but something did. Some understanding, some acknowledgement of what was to come. Summon the council, Rhaenyra said. All who are loyal, all who are here, or can be brought here swiftly. We will need every sword, every ship, every dragon. She paused, her gaze returning to the map, to the painted kingdoms spread before her. My father chose me as his heir. He made the lords of Westeros swear to uphold that choice. I will not let his wishes be cast aside because a weak boy and his grasping mother have seized a crown that is not theirs. There will be war, Corlys said quietly. There is already war. Rhaenyra's finger traced a line from King's Landing to Dragonstone. They started it the moment they crowned Aegon. We will finish it. Daemon smiled then, and it was not a pleasant expression. I'll send ravens to our allies, Stark, Aaron Tully, all who swore oaths to you. We'll see how many men remember the meaning of honor and those who do not, Celtigar asked. Those who do not, Rhaenyra said, will learn the price of broken oath, the same price every traitor learns in the end. She straightened, pulling her hands from the table, and for a moment she stood there, backlit by the rising sun through the eastern windows. In that light, with her silver hair and her black garments and her terrible resolve, she looked almost like a figure from legend, almost like Visenya herself returned from the grave to remind the realm what it meant to defy a dragon. This council will meet on the morrow, she announced. We will plan, we will prepare, and we will move swiftly. The Greens have stolen a march on us, but we have advantages they lack. We have dragons. We have the loyalty of the North and the Vale. We have the Velaryon fleet. She looked at each man in turn, and we have the law and the truth on our side. Truth and law do not win wars, Daemon observed. No, Rhaenyra agreed, but dragons do. After the princess and the lords had departed, Peter remained in the chamber, supposedly to tidy the papers and prepare the room for the next day's council. In truth, he needed a moment to compose himself, to still the shaking in his own hands that had nothing to do with age or infirmity. He had witnessed the start of something terrible. He knew it with the same certainty. He knew the sun would set and rise again. The realm would burn. Brother would fight brother. Dragon would battle dragon. And before it was done, the toll would be counted not in hundreds, but in thousands, perhaps tens of thousands. Outside, he could hear the dragons stirring in their lairs. Syrax's golden bulk would be moving restlessly, sensing her rider's distress. Caraxes, the blood worm, would be hissing in anticipation, knowing that demon's blood was up for battle. And the others, the younger dragons, the unclaimed ones, they would feel it too, this shift in the air, this scent of coming fire and blood. Peter moved to the window and looked out over the narrow sea. Somewhere to the west, across that grey water, King's Landing sprawled beneath his high-tower usurpers. The throne that Aegon the Conqueror had forged from the swords of his enemies sat in the Red Keep, and upon it sat a boy who had no right to it, who had been placed there by ambitious men and women who cared nothing for oaths or honour or the old king's wishes. A raven cried somewhere in the distance. More messages would come, Peter knew. More ravens, black and urgent, bringing news of armies gathering, of lords choosing sides, of the realm fracturing along old fault lines. He returned to the painted table and studied it in the morning light. How simple it looked, this map of kingdoms. How clean and orderly, with its neat borders and its painted castles. But Peter knew the truth. Westeros was not a table to be studied and organized. It was a living thing, full of blood and ambition and ancient hatreds, and it was about to tear itself apart. In his mind, he could already see it, the pieces moving across this table in the days to come, dragons flying toward war, ships sailing from their harbors, armies marching beneath different banners, each claiming righteousness, each certain of their cause, and at the end, when the fires had burned themselves out, and the blood had soaked into the ground, what would remain Peter did not know. He was not a prophet or a greenseer, only a scribe with ink-stained fingers and bastard blood. But he knew this. The message that had arrived with the dawn had changed everything. The old king was dead, the realm was broken, and the dragons were going to dance. He picked up his tablet and began to write, recording what he had witnessed for whatever future might come. It was what he did, what he had always done. He was the man who remembered, who kept the accounts, who made sure that history, true history, not the version the victors would write, was not forgotten. Outside, the sun climbed higher, burning away the morning mist. Dragonstone stood as it had stood for centuries, black and forbidding and eternal. But the realm it watched over would never be the same. The dance had begun. The great hall of Dragonstone had been built to intimidate. Petter Longwaters had walked through it 100 times, yet it never failed to stir something uneasy in his chest. The walls were carved to resemble dragons in the flight, their stone wings spread wide, their mouths open in silent roars. Torches burned in iron sconces shaped like claws, and the shadows they cast seemed to writhe and shift as if the stone beasts themselves were breathing. Now, as lords and advisors began to arrive for the first gathering of what men were already calling the Black Council, the hall seemed more alive than ever. The air was thick with tension and the smell of burning pitch, and every footfall echoed against the ancient stone. Peter had positioned himself in his customary place, a small desk set against the eastern wall, half hidden behind a pillar carved to resemble a dragon's tail. From here he could see and hear everything while remaining beneath notice. Lord Corlys had instructed him to record the proceedings, though Peter suspected the sea snake wanted a true account kept, one that would not be subject to the revisions and polite lies that often crept into official histories. The first to arrive, even before Princess Rhaenyra herself, was Lord Bartimos Celtigar. The old lord moved with the stiff dignity of advanced years, his doublet embroidered with the red crabs of his ancient house. He carried himself as if those crabs were dragons, and perhaps he had earned that right. House Celtigar had bent the knee to the Targaryens before Aegon's conquest, when Dragonstone was merely an outpost of Valyrian power in a world of first men and Andals. A black day, Celtigar muttered to no one in particular as he took his seat. A black day for the realm. Sir Steffon Darklyn arrived next, his armour still bearing the dust of hard riding. The Knight of Duskendale was a loyal man, his house sworn to Dragonstone for generations, but Peter could see the worry etched into his weathered face. Duskendale sat perilously close to King's Landing, and Darklyn lands would be among the first to burn if war came. When war came, Peter corrected himself. There was no if about it anymore. My lords, Darklyn said, bowing to Celtigar. I came as swiftly as I could. The roads are already watched. Hightower men wearing the king's colours. He said king with such venom that Peter nearly flinched. Aegon's colours, you mean, Celtigar said. That Hightower whelp is no true king. Never will be, no matter how many crowns they place upon his head. Lord Corlys Velaryon entered then, and the lesser lords rose from their seats. The sea snake commanded respect through presence alone. His bearing was that of a man who had sailed the Jade Sea and the Summer Sea, who had faced pirates and slavers and storms that would have broken lesser men. His wealth was legendary, his fleet the greatest in Westeros, save perhaps for the Royal Navy itself. And now that fleet belonged to Rhaenyra's cause. Behind Corlys came his wife, the Princess Rhaenys Targaryen, the queen who never was. Some called her, for she had been passed over in favour of Viserys years ago, her claim set aside simply because she had been born a woman. Peter watched as she moved through the hall, her silver hair braided in the Valyrian fashion, her bearing every bit as regal as her husband's. She had her own dragon, Meleys the Red Queen, and her own grievances against those who would deny a woman her birthright aunt. Came a voice from the shadows, and Prince Daemon emerged from a side entrance. He had forgone his usual finery for simpler garb, black leather and dark wool, practical clothing for a man preparing for war. Dark Sister hung at his hip, the rippled Valyrian steel catching the torchlight. You grace us with your presence. Would that the circumstances were different, Rhaenys replied, her voice carrying the musical accent of High Valyrian. But here we are blood against blood once more. The wheel turns and the dragons eat each other's tails. Daemon's smile was sharp. Better to be the dragon doing the eating than the tail being devoured. More lords arrived in quick succession. Sir Medric Manderley, a younger son of White Harbour, sent south to represent his house's interests. Lord Gorman Massey of Stonedance, whose lands sat across a Blackwater Bay from King's Landing itself. Sir Laurent Marbrand, wearing the burning tree of his house, come from the Westerlands with whispered promises of support from certain lords who had no love for the Lannisters. Each arrival brought news, which houses had declared for Aegon, which remained silent, which sent secret messages of support to Dragonstone. Peter's stylus moved swiftly across his tablet, recording names and titles, noting the alliances being forged in hurried conversations before the council proper began. He had learned to read men over his years in service, the way Manderley's eyes kept darting to the carved dragons on the walls, betraying northern unease with such blatant sorcery. How Massey stood close to the door as if already planning his escape should things go poorly. The confidence in Marbrand's stance, the bearing of a man who knew his worth and expected it to be recognized. A hush fell over the hall as Princess Rhaenyra entered. She wore black still as befitted mourning, but now there were rubies at her throat and wrists, blood-red stones that caught the firelight. Her silver-gold hair had been braided and pinned in the elaborate style of Valyrian nobility, and upon her head sat a circlet of dark metal worked with dragons. It was not a crown, not yet, but the message was clear. This was not a grieving daughter seeking comfort. This was a queen come to claim her throne. Behind her walked her sons. Jacaerys Velaryon the eldest was 5 and 10 and already showed signs of the man he would become. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the dark hair of his true father, but the bearing of a prince. Lucerys, 2 years younger, walked with less confidence, but equal determination. The younger boys, Joffrey and the babes, Aegon and Viserys, had been left in the nursery, too young for councils of war. Peter noted the way some lords' eyes lingered on the princes, saw the calculations being made. Everyone knew the truth, though none spoke it aloud, that these boys were not truly Laenor Velaryon's sons, that their dark hair came from Sir Harwin Strong, the late Lord Commander of the City Watch. But Laenor had claimed them as his own before he died, and Corlys had acknowledged them as his grandsons. In the end, that was what mattered, that and the dragons they would ride. "My lords," Rhaenyra said, and the hall fell silent. "I thank you for coming swiftly in this dark hour. My father, King Viserys, first of his name, is dead." She paused, letting the weight of those words settle over the assembly. He died in his bed in the Red Keep, surrounded by those who claimed to care for him. Before his body was even cold, before his only daughter could be summoned to his side, Queen Alicent and her father, Otto Hightower, crowned my half-brother Aegon as king. Murmurs rippled through the hall. Even those who had already heard the news seemed shocked to hear it stated so boldly. "They did this in defiance of my father's wishes," Rhaenyra continued, her voice growing harder. "In defiance of the oaths, every great lord of Westeros swore to uphold my succession. In defiance of law and custom and simple decency. They did this because they believe that power is something to be seized, not something to be earned or inherited by right." Lord Celtigar rose from his seat. "They are traitors, Your Grace, every one of them. The penalty for treason is death." "Aye," rumbled Sir Stephen Darklyn, "death and attainder. Their lands should be forfeit, their houses destroyed." "Bold words," Demon interjected, his voice soft but carrying. "But before we speak of death and attainder, perhaps we should discuss the small matter of actually winning this war. The Greens hold King's Landing. They hold the royal treasury, the Iron Throne itself, and the support of more houses than I care to count. They hold nothing that is rightfully theirs," Rhaenyra said. "King's Landing may have walls, but we have dragons. The treasury may be full, but gold cannot fight battles. And as for the houses that support them, we shall see how loyal they remain when faced with dragonfire. Corlys stepped forward, his hand resting on the pommel of his sword. If we are to speak of practical matters, then let us speak plainly. We need to know where we stand. Which houses can we count on? Which will betray us? Which will wait to see which way the wind blows? The North will stand with us, declared Sir Medric Manderley. Lord Cregan Stark is a man of honour. He swore an oath to Princess Rhaenyra, and he will keep it. The North remembers. The Vale as well, added another lord. Lady Jane Arryn rules there now, and she will not suffer a woman's claim to be set aside. She knows too well what it means to have men question her right to rule. Daemon moved to stand beside his wife, and Peter noticed how naturally they complemented each other. Fire and ice, fury and calculation. The Riverlands are less certain, Daemon said. Old Lord Tully is dying, and his grandson is young and untested, but the Riverlords have long memories. Many of them fought beside my brother and me during the Stepstones campaign. They will remember. And the Stormlands? Rhaenyra asked. A heavy silence fell. Lord Bormund Baratheon of Storm's End had been one of the great lords who swore to uphold Rhaenyra's claim years ago, but he was old now, and his heir was said to be in King's Landing when Aegon was crowned. We have sent ravens, Corlys said carefully, but Storm's End has not yet replied. Then we send a dragon, Daemon said flatly. Let Bormund Baratheon be reminded of what his oath meant. Let him see what happens to those who forget. We cannot threaten every lord who hesitates, Rhaenys interjected. Fear is a tool, yes, but it is a crude one. We need allies who fight for us because they believe in our cause, not because they fear our wrath, do we? Daemon's smile was cold. I find that fear serves quite well. Fear is honest, at least. These lords who swore their pretty oaths, how many of them truly believed a woman should rule? How many swore because they feared my brother's displeasure or because they saw advantage in it? Fear made them kneel then. Fear will make them kneel again. Peter Stylus paused for a moment as he watched the dynamic between the prince and princess, husband and wife, uncle and niece. There was love there, he thought, or something like it. But there was also a difference in approach that would matter in the days to come. Rhaenyra wanted to be seen as the rightful queen, beloved and just. Daemon simply wanted to win by whatever means necessary. The Reach troubles me, Lord Celtigar said. House Tyrell has not declared, but many of the Reach lords are bound to House Hightower by marriage or alliance. And the Citadel sits in Old Town, remember. The Maesters will support whoever the Hightowers support. Then we remind the Reach lords that dragons burned Harrenhal to slag, Daemon said. That Aegon the Conqueror needed only a day to break the greatest fortress in Westeros. Let them consider what we could do to their castles and their crops. The Westerlands will follow the Lannisters, Sir Laurent Marbrand said quietly. And the Lannisters have tied themselves to the High Towers through marriage and ambition. Lord Jason commands great wealth and can field thousands of men. Let them field 100,000, Rhaenyra said. How many will stand when Syrax flies overhead? How many will fight when Caraxes descends upon them? Peter found himself thinking about the dragons as he wrote. He had seen them often enough, heard their roars, smelled the sulphur and smoke that clung to them, but he had never truly considered them as weapons of war. Aegon the Conqueror had used 3 dragons to unite 6 kingdoms. How many dragons did Rhaenyra command now? Syrax, her golden mount, Caraxes, Daemon's bloodworm, Miles, ridden by Rhaenys, and the younger dragons, Vermax and Arax, which the princes Jacaeris and Lucaris were learning to ride. Others as well, unclaimed but growing larger every year in the volcanic caves beneath the castle. Against this, the Greens had their own dragons. Aegon rode Sunfire, they said, a golden beast of renowned beauty. Aemond One-Eye had claimed Vagar, oldest and largest of all living dragons. Helena had Dreamfire. The balance was not so uneven as Rhaenyra seemed to believe. "We need more than dragons," Corley said, as if reading Pater's thoughts. "We need ships and men and gold. We need to control the Gullet and the Narrow Sea, to strangle King's Landing supply lines. My fleet can do this, but it will take time and careful planning. We need our allies to declare for us swiftly," Rhaenyra added. "Every day that passes gives the Greens time to consolidate their power, to win over the uncertain houses. We must move quickly." Daemon laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Move quickly? My dear wife, the Hightowers have been planning this for years. Every marriage alliance, every appointment, every whispered word in my brother's ear, all of it was building to this moment. They have moved quickly. We are the ones playing catch-up." "Then we must be smarter," Rhaenyra said, faster, more ruthless. "Now you're talking sense," Daemon replied. Young Jacaeris stepped forward then, and Pater was struck by the courage it must have taken for the boy to speak in this company of hardened lords and battle-tested warriors. "Mother," he said, "let me fly to the north. Let me carry your message to Lord Stark myself. A raven can be ignored. A prince on dragonback cannot." Rhaenyra looked at her son, and for a moment her mask of queenly composure slipped. Pater saw the mother beneath, the woman who had already lost so much, her father, her throne, her childhood friend Alicent, to ambition and poison. Now her son was asking to fly into danger, to become a piece in this deadly game. "Jacaeris is right," Daemon said. "We should send the princes as envoys. Let the lords see the heirs to the throne. Let them remember that this is not just about competing claims. This is about the future of House Targaryen." "They are children," Rhaenys said softly. "They are princes," Daemon countered, "and they have dragons. In this war, that is what matters." Peter watched as Rhaenyra struggled with the decision. He could see the calculations running behind her eyes, the strategic value of sending dragon-riding envoys against the maternal instinct to protect her children. In the end, strategy won, as he had known it would. This was the price of crowns after all. This was what it meant to rule. "Very well," Rhaenyra said. "Jacaeris will fly north to Winterfell. Lucerys will go to Storm's End. But you will take no chances, do you understand? You are envoys, not warriors. Deliver my messages and return as swiftly." The boys nodded, trying to hide their excitement and fear in equal measure. The council continued for hours more, discussing supply lines and battle plans, debating which lords to approach and which to consider enemies from the start. Peter's hand began to cramp from writing, but he did not stop. Every word, every decision, every argument, he recorded it all. As the sun began to set and torches were lit throughout the hall, Peter found himself studying the faces around the table. These were the people who would shape the war to come. Some would die in it, he knew. Some would betray the cause they now championed. Some would become heroes, others villains, and most would simply be forgotten, swept away in the tide of history. But tonight, in this hall carved with dragons, they were united in purpose. Tonight, they believed they could win. Outside, in the dying light, the real dragons stirred in their lairs, and Peter wondered if they knew what was coming. Did they sense the gathering storm? Did they dream of fire and blood? The dance had begun, and there would be no stopping it now. Maester Gerardis had served House Targaryen on Dragonstone for nearly 3 decades, and in all that time he had never seen the painted table put to such grim purpose. The great map that Aegon the Conqueror had commissioned, wood-carved and painted to show every hill and stream, every castle and keep of the 7 kingdoms, had been meant as a tool of unity, a symbol of the realm brought together under dragon wings. Now it would be used to tear that realm apart. He stood at the southern edge of the table, near the painted deserts of Dawn, his hands clasped behind his back in the manner of maesters everywhere. Around him, the War Council had assembled once more, the second day of their deliberations, and already the arguments were growing sharper, the divisions clearer. Princess Rhaenyra stood at the table's heart, her fingers resting on the painted red keep where Aegon the usurper now sat upon her father's throne. She had slept little, Gerardis knew. He had brought her dream wine the night before, but she had waved it away, preferring instead to study maps and correspondence by candlelight until dawn crept through her windows. Lord Corley's Velaryon occupied the eastern edge, where the narrow sea met the stepstones. The sea snake's knowledge of those waters was unmatched, and he had already begun explaining how his fleet could strangle King's Landing's seaborne trade. "The gullet," he said, pointing to the narrow strait between Dragonstone and the mainland, "is the key. Every ship bringing grain from the Reach or the Stormlands must pass through here. We control this. We control what eats and what starves. Starving the small folk of King's Landing will not win us their love," Rhaenys observed. She stood beside her husband, her silver hair bright even in the chamber's dim light. "They will blame us for their empty bellies, not Aegon." "Let them blame us," Daemon said from across the table. He had positioned himself at the riverlands, his finger tracing the path of the trident. "Once we've won, they'll sing songs of Rhaenyra the Wise and forget they ever went hungry. The small folk always do." Gerardis noted the way Rhaenyra's jaw tightened at her husband's words, though she did not contradict him. The Maester had learned to read the subtle tensions between the royal couple. Daemon's ruthless pragmatism against Rhaenyra's desire to be seen as a just and rightful queen. Both approaches had merit. Both had flaws. The trick would be finding the balance between them. "The North concerns me," said Lord Celtigar, leaning heavily on his walking stick as he studied the vast painted expanse beyond the neck. "It's too far, too isolated. Even if Lord Stark declares for us immediately, his army would take months to march south. And winter is coming. It always is. In the north. Which is precisely why we need the north," Rhaenyra replied. "When the Stark banners march south, every lord in Westeros will know we have the backing of the oldest and most honorable house in the realm. The north remembers, they say. Let them remember the oaths sworn to me." Gerardis cleared his throat softly. "Your Grace, if I may?" When Rhaenyra nodded, he continued, "The Starks are indeed honorable, but honor is a double-edged sword. Lord Cregan is young, barely 21, and by all accounts, a serious man who weighs his words carefully. He will support your claim, I have no doubt. The oaths his father and grandfather swore bind him as surely as iron chains. But he will expect the same honor from us in return. Meaning, Demon asked, his tone sharp. Meaning we cannot ask the North to bleed for us while we pursue strategies that would complicate the moral clarity of our cause. Gerardis chose his words carefully, aware that he walked a dangerous line. The North follows the old gods. They believe in certain codes, certain ways of conducting war. If we are seen to violate guess right, or to slaughter prisoners, or to win by any means necessary, Damon finished. The old gods will forgive much if we're victorious. Master, dead gods always do. The old gods are not dead in the North, Rhaenys said quietly, and neither is their memory. My lord husband, I believe Master Gerardis speaks sense. We need the North's support, yes, but we need the moral authority that comes with it as well. If we are to be seen as the rightful queen defending her lawful claim, we cannot be seen as monsters. Corlys nodded slowly. There is wisdom in that. The commons may not care who sits the Iron Throne, but they care about harvest and peace, and not seeing their villages burned. If we're to win, we need more than swords. We need the realm to believe in our cause. The realm will believe what we tell them to believe once we've won, Demon muttered, but he did not press the point. Gerardis watched as Rhaenyra's attention shifted north along the painted map, her fingers tracing the King's Road. Jacaerys will fly to Winterfell on Vermax. The sight of a dragon-riding prince will remind Lord Stark that we are not merely rebels seeking power. We are the blood of Aegon the Conqueror, the rightful heirs to the Iron Throne. And what of the Vale? Asked Sir Stephen Darklyn. Lady Jane Arryn has her own troubles. Men who question her rule simply because she's a woman. She should be a natural ally. Should be, Rhaenyra agreed. But the Vale is insular, defensive. They hide behind their mountains and their bloody gate and call it strength. We need to make Lady Jane see that her cause and mine are one. That if a woman's claim can be set aside in King's Landing, it can be set aside in the Eyrie just as easily. Gerardis moved around the table to the eastern mountains, where the Vale sat isolated and protected. The Vale has wealth and knights aplenty, Your Grace. If Lady Jane declares for you, she can send men through the bloody gate and down into the Riverlands. From there they can threaten King's Landing from the north while we attack from the east, Corlys finished. Yes, the Vale is crucial. Perhaps Princess Rhaenys should fly to the Eyrie on melees. A queen to speak with a lady, dragon to dragon, so to speak. Rhaenys considered this. It might serve. Jane Arryn is proud, but she's not foolish. She knows what happened to her cousin, how the Lords of the Vale tried to set her aside in favor of a male heir. I can speak to her in terms she'll understand. Do it, Rhaenyra said. Leave on the morrow, if the weather holds. We need the Vale committed before the Greens can offer them something we cannot match. Demon had moved to the western edge of the table now, his fingers drumming on the painted gold mines of Casterly Rock. The Westerlands will fight for Aegon. Jason Lannister is married to a high tower, and his brother Tyland sits on the small council. We should write them off as lost and plan accordingly. Not all of the West loves the Lannisters, said Sir Laurent Marbrand. The knight from the Westerlands had been quiet until now, but he spoke with conviction. Houses, Marbrand, Lefford, Rain. We remember when the Lannisters were just one house among many, not the overlords they pretend to be. If you give us cause and opportunity, Your Grace, some of us might be persuaded to complicate Lord Jason's plans. Girardi saw the interest spark in Daemon's eyes. Rebellion in the Westerlands would tie down thousands of Lannister soldiers. Even if you couldn't win, if you could force Jason to fight on two fronts, my people would die, Marbrand said flatly. Make no mistake, Prince Daemon, I'm not offering this lightly. Casterly Rock can field tens of thousands. The houses I speak of can muster hundreds, perhaps a few thousand if we're fortunate. We would be crushed eventually. But you would buy us time, Rhaenyra said. She met Marbrand's eyes, and Girardis noted the respect in that gaze. You would be remembered as heroes who stood for the rightful queen, when it would have been safer to bend the knee to a usurper. Songs and memories won't feed our widows, Your Grace. No, Rhaenyra agreed. But gold might, and lands, once we've won. The Lannisters have grown fat and proud. If some of their richest territories were to be redistributed to those who remained loyal. She let the suggestion hang in the air. Marbrand bowed his head. I will write to my cousins, and those I trust. We'll see what can be done. The council's attention turned to the Riverlands, the fractured tangle of rivers and competing loyalties that sat at the heart of Westeros. Here, the painted map showed dozens of castles, each representing a house with its own history, its own grievances, its own ambitions. The Riverlands are chaos. Given geography, Daemon observed. Old Lord Grover Tully is dying, has been dying for years, if the reports are true. His grandson Elmo is the heir, but the boy is young and untested. Below them, every river lord thinks he should be paramount. The Blackwoods hate the Brackens. The Friars resent everyone, and none of them can agree on anything for longer than a fortnight, which makes them perfect. Corley said, chaos. We can exploit. Send them promises, offer them honors and positions. Play the Blackwoods against the Brackens. Remind the Tullys that they swore oaths to Princess Rhaenyra. The Riverlands won't unite behind anyone. But if we can get even half of them fighting for us, while the other half stays neutral, that's victory enough. Girardi spoke up again. The Riverlands, remember the conquest, Your Grace. Harrenhal still stands as a monument to what Dragonfire can do to even the mightiest fortress. That memory cuts both ways. It can inspire fear or respect, depending on how we present ourselves. Fear, Daemon said. Always fear. Respect is what comes after you've won. Respect is what keeps you on the throne after you've won it. Rhaenys countered. Fear only lasts as long as the dragons live. What happens when they're gone? What happens when the small folk decide they've been frightened long enough? Rhaenyra held up a hand, forestalling the argument. We will use both. Fear when we must. Respect when we can. The Riverlands will see Dragonfire if they resist us, but they will see justice and fair rule if they bend the knee. The discussion moved south to the Stormlands, and here the mood grew darker. Storm's End was one of the great castles of the realm, and the House Baratheon one of its most powerful. Lord Boromund had sworn to uphold Rhaenyra's claim years ago, but he was old now, and his sons were said to be in King's Landing when Aegon was crowned. We need the Stormlands, Rhaenyra said simply. The Baratheons command the loyalty of dozens of houses. If they declare for us, the entire southeast falls into our hands. And if they declare for Aegon? Celtigar asked. Silence fell over the chamber. Gerardis could see the calculations running behind every eye. What it would mean to lose the Stormlands, how it would shift the balance of power, how many men and how much gold would be denied to Rhaenyra's cause. Then we burn Storm's End to its foundations, Daemon said quietly. We show the realm what happens to oathbreakers. Storm's End cannot be burned, Gerardis felt compelled to point out. The histories tell us it has weathered storms that destroyed lesser castles, that its walls are proof against any siege, even dragonfire. Even dragonfire. Daemon's smile was cold. Meister, I know you're learned in your dusty books, but let me educate you about dragons. Harrenhal was stronger than Storm's End, and Aegon melted it like tallow. Vhagar was smaller then than she is now. If the Baratheons defy us, we'll see how well their castle stands against Dragonflame. We're sending Lucerys to Storm's End, Rhaenyra, said her voice firm. He'll ride our axe and carry my message to Lord Boros. A show of strength, a reminder of what dragons mean, but also a gesture of respect, sending my own son as envoy. Gerardis noted the name. Lord Boros, not Lord Bormund. So the old stag had died, or was dying, and the son now ruled. A younger man, untested, perhaps more ambitious, or more fearful than his father. It could work in their favor, or it could be a disaster. The boy is 13, Daemon said. Are you sure he's ready for this? He has to be, Rhaenyra replied, and Gerardis heard the weight of that statement, the price of crowns paid in children, sent to war. The council turned at last to the Reach, that vast and fertile land that fed much of the realm. Here the painted map showed Highgarden at the center of a web of lesser houses, all bound to the Tyrells, who had been raised up by Aegon the Conqueror to rule the former kingdom of the Gardener Kings. The Reach is the key to everything Corlys said. It produces more food than any other region, has more knights, more gold, more everything. If we can win the Reach, we cannot win the Reach. Daemon interrupted. House Hightower sits in Old Town, and half the Reach lords are bound to them by blood or marriage or debt. The Tyrells might waver, but the rest will follow the Hightowers like sheep. Then we don't need to win all of the Reach. Rhaenyra said we need to divide it. House Hightower may have influence, but there are old houses in the Reach who remember when the Hightowers were just one house among many. The Rowans, the Oakharts, the Tarleys. These are ancient families with long memories. If we can peel even a few of them away from Old Town's orbit, Gerardis nodded slowly. There is precedent for division in the Reach. The houses there are proud and often at odds with each other. A few well-placed promises, a few strategic marriages perhaps, and we might sow enough discord to keep them fighting amongst themselves rather than united against us. I'll leave the seduction of southern lords to those better suited for it. Daemon said dryly. What matters is this, even if we win the north, the Vale, and the Riverlands, even if we hold the Narrow Sea and the Stepstones, we still need to break the Green's hold on the south. That means the Stormlands, and it means at least neutralizing the Reach. The council continued deep into the afternoon, debating strategies and contingencies, arguing over which houses to approach and which to consider lost causes. Gerardis watched and listened, occasionally offering his knowledge of history or geography when called upon, but mostly observing the dynamics of this council that would shape the war to come. He saw how Daemon pushed for aggressive action, for striking swiftly and without mercy. He saw how Rhaenyra tried to balance that aggression with the need to be seen as a just and rightful queen. He saw how Corlys thought in terms of trade routes and supply lines, the practical concerns of a man who had built a fortune through careful planning. He saw how Rhaenys served as a moderating influence, reminding them that wars were fought not just with swords, but with hearts and minds. As the sun began to set and servants brought in fresh candles, Gerardis found himself thinking about what was being decided here. The realm would fracture along predictable lines, north against south, old houses against new, those who valued oaths against those who valued power. Brother would fight brother, neighbor would burn neighbor's fields, and before it was done, tens of thousands would die. And for what? For the question of whether a woman could inherit the Iron Throne? Or was it deeper than that? Old resentments and new ambitions, the eternal struggle between honor and pragmatism, the weight of history against the pull of the future. Maester Gerardis, Rhaenyra said, pulling him from his thoughts. You've been quiet. What counsel do you offer? He considered his words carefully. A master was sworn to serve, not to rule, to advise without agenda. But he had watched Rhaenyra grow from a girl to a woman, had taught her sons their letters, had earned the right to speak truth, even when it was uncomfortable. Your Grace, he said slowly, I have studied the histories of the House Targaryen since Aegon's conquest. I have read of the battles and the triumphs, the dragons and the glory, but I have also read of the costs. The dance of the dragons, should this war come to be called that, will not be a clean thing or a simple thing. Both sides have dragons. Both sides have just claims, in their own eyes. Both sides will believe they fight for what is right. He paused, looking around at the assembled lords and warriors. Victory is possible. I believe that. But it will not be easy, and it will not be without terrible cost. The question you must ask yourselves is whether the Iron Throne is worth the price you will have to pay, and more importantly, the price the realm will have to pay. Silence greeted his words. Then Rhaenyra spoke, her voice quiet but firm. My father chose me as his heir. He made that choice knowing what it meant, knowing the opposition it would face. I will not dishonor his memory by surrendering my birthright to thieves and usurpers. Whatever the cost, whatever the price, I will claim what is mine by right. Daemon smiled. Then let us stop talking and start acting. Send the ravens, send the princes, send the dragons. Let the realm know that the true queen has come to claim her throne. One by one, the lords nodded their agreement. The decision was made. The war had truly begun. Gerardis looked down at the painted table, at the kingdom spread before him like pieces on a sevas board. He wondered how many of those painted castles would still be standing when this was over. He wondered how much of the realm would burn before the dragons were done dancing. Outside, in the gathering dusk, he could hear the real dragons stirring in their lairs, their roars echoing across the volcanic stone of Dragonstone. They knew. Somehow, they always knew when blood was coming. The Maester returned to his notes, recording every word, every decision. History would judge them all he knew. The only question was what that judgment would be. The dragon lairs beneath Dragonstone had been carved from volcanic rock in the days before Aegon's conquest, when the Targaryens were merely one Dragonlord family among many exiles clinging to their last outpost in Westeros. The passages wound deep into the island's heart, where the heat of the earth itself kept the great beasts warm, and the stone was black as midnight mushroom. The dwarf fool who served Princess Rhaenyra's household had lived on Dragonstone long enough to know these tunnels well, though he rarely ventured deep into them if he could help it. Dragons were dangerous creatures, even to those they tolerated, and Mushroom was no dragon rider. But he served his princess faithfully, and when she commanded him to summon the dragon keepers to the council chamber, he obeyed, though he muttered curses under his breath the entire way down the head. Dragon Keeper was a man called Tarin, dark-skinned and scarred, who had served House Targaryen for 40 years. He spoke the old tongue of Valyria as fluently as the common tongue, and it was said he understood dragons better than he understood men. When Mushroom delivered the princess's summons, Tarin merely nodded and followed, his weathered face betraying no emotion. They returned to find the council reassembled in the great hall, but this time the painted table had been abandoned in favor of a series of scrolls and documents spread across a smaller table. These were the records of the dragons, their lineages, their temperaments, their sizes, their riders past and present. Princess Rhaenyra stood at the center, her face pale but determined. Beside her, Prince Daemon studied the documents with the intensity of a warrior inspecting his weapons before battle. Lord Corlys and Princess Rhaenys had taken seats nearby, while the younger lords and advisors formed a semicircle around them. Maester Gerardis was reading from a scroll, his voice carrying in the stone chamber. By the most recent accounting, there are 10 dragons currently residing on Dragonstone, or claimed by members of House Targaryen. The largest is Vhagar, claimed by Prince Aemond in King's Landing, the oldest living dragon, hatched in the days of Aegon, the Conqueror himself. Next in size would be— "We know which dragons the Greens have," Daemon interrupted. "Vhagar, Sunfire, Dreamfire, and possibly Tessarion, if Daron is old enough to ride. What matters is what we have." Tarin, the Dragon Keeper, stepped forward, bowing to Rhaenyra before speaking. "Your Grace commands 5 dragons directly. Syrax, your own mount, is a formidable beast, though not bred for war. The princess prefers gentler handling, and Syrax has grown comfortable in recent years." Mushroom saw Rhaenyra's jaw tighten at the implied criticism, but she said nothing. It was true enough. Syrax was well-fed and well-tended, but she had never flown in battle, never tasted human flesh, never known the fury of true combat Caraxes. Tarin continued, nodding to Daemon, "is a war dragon. The bloodworm has fought in the Stepstones, has killed men and burned ships. He is lean and fierce and utterly loyal to his rider, as all dragons should be," Daemon said quietly. "Meleys the Red Queen, ridden by Princess Rhaenys, is nearly as large as Caraxes, and equally fierce, a magnificent beast, swift and deadly. Then we have the younger dragons. Vermax, bonded to Prince Jacaerys, and Arax, bonded to Prince Lucerys. Both are still growing, but large enough to bear riders and breathe fire hot enough to melt steel. 5 dragons, Lord Celtigar said. Against the Greens' 4 numbers are not everything Rhaenys said. Vhagar alone could challenge any 2 of our dragons. She is a living relic of the conquest, huge beyond measure. I fought in the wars against Dawn, saw what she could do even then. She is larger now, more terrible. We cannot simply count dragons and assume victory." "What of the unclaimed dragons?" Rhaenyra asked. "Those who lair here on Dragonstone, but have no riders." Tarin's expression grew troubled. "There are 4 such beasts, Your Grace. Sea Smoke, who was ridden by Sir Laenor Velaryon before his death. The dragon has not accepted another rider since. Vermithor, the old king's mount. Vermithor, demon, said, his eyes lighting up. The bronze fury, nearly as large as Vagar and far more battle-tested. If we could find a rider for him. The beast is old and fierce, and has known only one rider in all his long years. Taran warned King Jaehaerys, rode Vermithor for half a century. The dragon grieved when the old king died, and he has accepted no one since. Many have tried. Several have died in the attempt. What of Silverwing Rhaenys asked. Queen Alysanne's dragon. She is old as well, but gentler than Vermithor, or so the tales say. Silverwing dwells in the deeper caves. Taran confirmed. She is large and strong, yes, but she, too, has been riderless for many years. She might accept someone of Targaryen blood, someone patient and skilled, but there is no guarantee. Mushroom listened as the council debated the dragon question, and he could not help but think about the terrible mathematics being discussed. Each dragon represented not just a weapon, but a risk. Each potential rider faced death if the beast rejected them. And even if they succeeded in claiming new dragons, each rider sent into battle might not return. There are the wild dragons as well, Maester Gerardi said, consulting his notes. Grey Ghost, who makes his lair on the eastern cliffs. The cannibal, who dwells on the northern shore, and is said to eat the eggs and hatchlings of other dragons, and Sheepstealer, who raids the shepherd's flocks on the western coast. Wild dragons cannot be trusted, Taran said, flatly. They have never known riders, never known the bond. To attempt to claim one would be madness. War is madness, Daemon observed. But we do it anyway. Prince Jacaerys, who had been silent until now, spoke up. His voice was steady, despite his youth. Mother, you spoke of sending Luke and me as envoys to Storm's End and Winterfell. Should we not also consider who else might ride? If there are dragons without riders, and riders without dragons, you mean to suggest we find riders among those not of pure Targaryen blood? Lord Celtigar looked scandalized. The dragons have always been the province of House Targaryen. To give such power to bastards or common-born Aegon, the Conqueror gave kingdoms to common-born men who proved themselves worthy, Rhaenyra said. If there are those with enough Targaryen blood, however diluted, who could claim a dragon and fight for our cause, then we should consider it. The dragons will choose or reject as they see fit, Daemon said. That is their nature. But my wife is right. We cannot afford to let pride blind us to opportunity. If Dragonstone has dragon seeds, bastards with enough Valyrian blood to attempt the claiming, then we should find them. Mushroom saw the calculation in their eyes, the cold arithmetic of war. More dragons meant more power. More power meant better odds of victory. What did it matter if a few bastards died in the attempt to claim wild beasts? What were their lives weighed against the Iron Throne? Yet there was another consideration, one that Rhaenys gave voice to. If we arm common folk with dragons, even those of Targaryen bastard blood, we set a dangerous precedent. The dragons have always been what sets House Targaryen above other houses. They are the symbol of our right to rule, the proof of our Valyrian heritage. Once we give that power to others, we might actually win this war. Demon finished. I'll take victory with armed bastards over noble defeat any day. There is another matter to consider, Maester Gerardi said quietly. The nature of dragons themselves. They are not horses to be ridden into battle and stabled afterward. They are creatures of fire and fury barely controlled even by their bonded riders. In the histories, we have seen what happens when dragons fight dragons. The damage is catastrophic. "Tell us," Rhaenyra commanded. Gerardis consulted his notes, though Mushroom suspected the Maester knew these tales by heart. During the reign of Maegor the Cruel, dragons fought in the skies above the God's Eye. The battle lasted less than an hour, but when it was done, 3 dragons were dead, and the lake itself was said to boil with their blood. Entire forests were set aflame. The very earth was scorched black for miles in every direction. "That was 2 dragons fighting," Demon said. "We speak of potentially 10 or more, all in the skies at once." A heavy silence fell over the chamber. Mushroom watched the faces around him as the reality sank in. This would not be clean warfare, not orderly battles with clear victors and defeated. This would be fire and chaos, destruction on a scale not seen since Aegon's conquest. "The small folk will suffer most," Rhaenys said softly. "When dragons fight, when cities burn, it is always the small folk who pay the highest price." "The small folk always pay the price," Demon replied. "Whether dragons fight or men with swords, it makes no difference to those who die." "It makes a difference to history," Gerardis said, "to how our cause is remembered. If we win through dragonfire alone, if we burn cities and castles and leave only ash behind, then we will be remembered as tyrants, not as the rightful rulers defending a legitimate claim." Rhaenyra was quiet for a long moment, her eyes distant. When she spoke, her voice was measured. "We will use the dragons as we must. We will claim what riderless beasts can be claimed. We will seek out those with Targaryen blood who might attempt the bonding. And when we fight, we will fight to win, but we will not become monsters in the pursuit of victory." "Pretty words," Demon said, "but war has a way of making monsters of us all." Tarin, the Dragon Keeper, cleared his throat. "If your grace truly wishes to pursue this path, to seek out potential riders for the unclaimed dragons, then it must be done carefully. The beasts are old and dangerous. Vermithor alone has killed 3 men who attempted to claim him since King Jaehaerys died. The wild dragons are even more unpredictable." "What would you advise?" Rhaenyra asked. "Patience," Tarin said, "and respect. The dragons are not tools to be wielded at our convenience. They are living creatures with their own wills, their own desires. Those who seek to claim them must approach with humility and courage both, and they must be prepared to die." "How long does the bonding take?" asked Jacaerys. "If Luke and I are to fly north and south, we need to know our dragons will answer to us. Vermax and Arax are already bonded to you," Tarin assured him. "You have ridden them for years now, fed them from your own hands, spoken to them in the old tongue. They know you, trust you, but you must remember, they are still young, still learning. In battle, they may panic or disobey. Dragon riding in war is not the same as dragon riding for sport." Mushroom saw the flash of fear in young Lucerys's eyes, quickly hidden. The boy was barely 13, being sent to Storm's End on a dragon barely old enough to carry him to deliver messages that might mean the difference between victory and defeat. It was a heavy burden for one so young. "We should discuss strategy," Corley said, steering the conversation back to practical matters. "If we have 5 dragons we can count on now, and potentially more, if we can claim the riderless ones, how do we deploy them most effectively?" "Syrax should remain here, guarding Dragonstone and the royal family," Demon said. It was phrased as a suggestion, but Mushroom heard the command beneath it. Demon did not want his wife flying into battle. Not yet. Rhaenyra bristled at the implication. I am not some helpless maid to be locked in a tower while men fight my battles. No, Demon agreed. You are the queen, and the queen must survive. If you die, the cause dies. With you, Syrax can defend Dragonstone as well as any dragon. Let others take the war to the enemy. Prince Demon speaks truth, Rhaenys said. Though Mushroom could see she understood Rhaenyra's frustration. You have sons who can carry your messages, a husband who can lead your armies. What you cannot do is risk yourself needlessly. Not yet. Not until the time is right. Rhaenyra's hands clenched into fists, but she nodded slowly. Very well. For now, Syrax and I remain here. But do not mistake caution for cowardice. When the time comes to fight, I will not hide behind stone walls. Caraxes and Meles can strike at our enemies, Demon said, warming to the tactical discussion. Harass their supply lines, burn their crops, make them fear the sky. We have the advantage of surprise. The Greens know we have dragons, but they don't know where or when we'll strike. Until they send their own dragons to hunt ours, Corlys pointed out. Then we have dragon fighting dragon, and all the destruction Maester Gerardi spoke of. So we choose our battles carefully, Demon said. We strike where they cannot respond quickly, where their dragons cannot reach us. We use our knowledge of Westeros, our alliances, our superior numbers. We do not have superior numbers, Rhaenys interrupted. We have equal numbers at best, and Vargar tips the balance against us. One dragon, yes, but she is a monster from legend. She could kill Caraxes or Meles if given the chance. Then we make sure she never gets that chance, Daemon said. We fight smart, not fair. We attack when they're divided, when Vargar is separated from the other dragons. And if necessary, we use multiple dragons against one. There is no honor in this war, only victory or death. Mushroom watched as the council continued its dark calculations, counting dragons like coins, weighing the lives of riders against the value of their mounts. He thought about Syrax, golden and lazy, being forced into the role of guardian. He thought about Caraxes and Meles, seasoned and deadly, preparing for battles that would make the Stepstones campaign look like a children's game. He thought about young Vermax and Arax, barely more than hatchlings in dragon terms, carrying princes into danger. And he thought about the wild dragons, the unclaimed ones, the beasts that had never known the hand of man. What would happen when desperate bastards tried to claim them? How many would die screaming in dragonfire before one succeeded? And what would those successful claimants become? Heroes or monsters? The dragons are ready, Taryn said finally. Whether we are ready for them is another question entirely. We have no choice but to be ready, Rhaenyra said. The Greens have declared war. We answer with fire and blood, our house words and our promise. Every dragon we can claim, every rider we can find, brings us closer to victory. Or closer to burning the realm to ashes, Gerardis murmured, so quietly that Mushroom barely heard him. But the master's words hung in the air nonetheless, a warning or a prophecy. The dragons were waking, stirring in their lairs beneath the volcanic stone. Soon they would fly to war, and when they did, the realm would burn. The only question was whether anything would be left standing when the fires finally died. Outside, in the failing light of evening, Mushroom could hear the dragons calling to each other. Their voices echoed across the island, ancient and terrible, the sound of a bygone age returning to haunt the present. The dance of the dragons was about to begin, and gods helped them all. The castle of Dragonstone had many secrets, and Peter Longwaters had learnt most of them over his years in service. He knew which servants gossiped and which kept silent. He knew which corridors carried sound and which swallowed it. He knew that the thick stone walls that seemed so impenetrable to outsiders were in truth riddled with passages and alcoves where a clever man might stand unseen and hear everything. It was in one such alcove, tucked behind a tapestry depicting Aegon's conquest, that Peter found himself on the third night after the Black Council had formally convened. The hour was late, well past midnight, and most of the castle had retired. But not everyone slept. Not when war loomed and alliances were still being forged in shadow. He heard footsteps approaching, 2 sets, one heavy and deliberate, the other lighter but equally purposeful. Peter pressed himself further into the shadows as the voices grew clearer. "You summoned me, Lord Corlys." That was Prince Daemon's voice, edged with curiosity and perhaps a hint of suspicion. "I thought it prudent we speak privately." The sea snake's voice was measured, careful. Away from the council chamber, away from advisors and scribes, and those who would report every word back to the princess. A pause. Peter could imagine Daemon's violet eyes narrowing. "You wish to speak of my wife without her knowing? That seems unwise, given her current disposition." "I wish to speak of our cause," Corlys corrected, "and of the best way to ensure its success. Surely you can see the value in that." "I can see many things, Lord Corlys. Tell me what troubles you." The 2 men had stopped just beyond Peter's hiding place. He dared not move, barely dared to breathe. Through a gap in the tapestry, he could see them, Daemon leaning against the stone wall with deceptive casualness, his hand never far from Dark Sister's pommel, while Corlys stood straight-backed despite his years. "The princess, the queen, has a good heart," Corlys began. "She wishes to be seen as just, as rightful, as the heir her father intended. These are admirable qualities." "I sense a but approaching," Daemon said dryly. "But a war is not won by good hearts alone." Corlys's voice dropped lower, and Peter strained to hear. "You fought in the Stepstones. You know what it takes to win. Ruthlessness, decisive action, the willingness to do what must be done without hesitation. Rhaenyra knows this in her mind, but in her heart, she is still her father's daughter," Daemon finished. "She wants to win the throne without becoming the monster they claim she is, without proving the Greens right when they say a woman is too soft to rule." "Precisely." Corlys sounded relieved to be understood. "Which is where you and I come in, Prince Daemon. We must be the ones willing to make the hard choices, to pursue the strategies that will win this war, even if they are unpalatable. We must protect the queen from having to dirty her own hands." Daemon laughed softly, a sound without humor. "You want me to be the villain so she can remain the hero, the cruel husband who does terrible things while his wife maintains her virtue? I want you to be what you have always been, a warrior who understands that victory requires sacrifice. The realm will forgive much if we win. They will sing songs of Queen Rhaenyra the wise, the just, the rightful heir restored. And if some of those songs mention her ruthless consort who did what was necessary, well, every queen needs a sword." Peter heard the scrape of leather on stone as Daemon shifted his weight. What exactly are you proposing, Lord Corlys? Speak plainly. The children, Corlys said, and Peter felt his blood run cold. Your stepsons, Jacaerys, Lucerys, Joffrey. The realm knows they are not truly Laena's sons. They know who their father was. This complicates matters. My stepsons are princes of House Targaryen. Daemon said, his voice suddenly dangerous. Acknowledged by their legal father, claimed by their grandfather. Any man who questions their legitimacy questions you, Lord Corlys. And I do not question it, Corlys said hastily. They are my grandsons-in-law, if not in blood, and I will defend them as such. But others will use this against us. The Greens already whisper that Rhaenyra's heirs are bastards, that her claim is further weakened by her moral failings. We need to address this concern. How? The single word was sharp as a blade. A betrothal. Young Jacaerys to my granddaughter Baela. It would strengthen our alliance, unite our houses more firmly, and provide an answer to those who question the succession. When Jacaerys eventually takes the throne after his mother, no one could question his wife's legitimacy. She is pure Targaryen on both sides, daughter of Prince Daemon himself. Peter heard Daemon's exhale, almost amused. You've thought this through. I have thought of little else these past days. The betrothal serves multiple purposes. It binds our houses, yes, but it also demonstrates strength and confidence. We do not hide from questions about the boy's parentage. We acknowledge the concerns and provide solutions. It shows we are thinking dynastically, planning for generations beyond this war. And the other boy, Lucerys, betrothed to my granddaughter Rhaena. Both girls are of appropriate age. Both have Targaryen blood, undiluted by question or scandal. The matches are politically sound and dynastically wise. You've arranged marriages for children in the middle of a war council, Daemon observed. I'm almost impressed by your ambition, Lord Corlys. I'm a practical man, Prince Daemon. I have not built my fortune by leaving matters to chance. These marriages will happen eventually. Why not formalize them now, when they can serve our cause? A long silence fell. Peter barely dared to breathe, waiting for Daemon's response. You're right, Daemon said finally. The betrothals make sense politically and dynastically. I'll speak to Rhaenyra about it. But understand this, Lord Corlys. If you ever speak of my stepson's legitimacy again, if you ever question their right to their titles and inheritance, grandfather or no grandfather, I will feed you to Caraxes, piece by piece. Are we clear? Perfectly clear. My Prince Corlys's voice was steady, unintimidated. I mean them no harm. Quite the opposite. I mean to secure their futures and ours. Then we understand each other. Peter heard footsteps, the conversation apparently ending. But Daemon spoke once more. You mentioned there were other matters requiring ruthless action. What else troubles you? The matter of Storm's End, Corlys said. We're sending young Lucerys as an envoy. But what if Lord Boros refuses? What if he declares for Aegon? Then we burn Storm's End, as I said in council. And how many innocents die in that burning? How many small folk and servants and guards who had no say in their lord's decision? The songs will not be kind to us if we slaughter thousands for one man's choice. Songs are written by the victors, Daemon said dismissively. We win. We control the narrative. Perhaps Corlys didn't sound convinced, but there may be another way. Lord Boros has daughters. Does he not? 4 of them, if the reports are accurate. Young ladies of marriageable age. You want to arrange more betrothals. Daemon's tone was sardonic. At this rate, every noble child in Westeros will be promised to someone else. Not betrothals, options. We send Lucerys with gifts, with promises, with the suggestion that one of Lord Borros's daughters might make a fine match for a Targaryen prince. We give him reasons to choose us beyond mere honor and oaths. Men fight harder for family than for abstract principles, clever Daemon admitted. Though if Borros has any sense, he'll realize we're trying to bribe him. Of course he'll realize it, but that doesn't mean it won't work. Every lord in Westeros understands the value of a royal marriage. If Borros can secure such a match for one of his daughters, he becomes the father of a future princess, perhaps even a queen consort. That kind of ambition overcomes a great deal of hesitation. Peter marveled at the calculation in Corlys's voice. This was how the great game was played, not with armies and dragons alone, but with marriages and promises, with understanding what men wanted and offering it to them at just the right moment. What of the North? Daemon asked. Cregan Stark is barely 21 and newly come to his lordship. How do we secure him? Honor, Corlys said, simply. The Starks practically worship the concept. We appeal to the oaths his father and grandfather swore. Remind him that the North has never broken its word. Jacaerys flies north on Dragonback, a prince of House Targaryen, seeking aid from an ancient and honorable house. The symbolism alone will bind Stark to us, unless the Greens offer him something we cannot match. What could they offer? Gold. The Starks have little use for southern gold. Land. The North is already vast beyond measure. Power. Cregan Stark is one of the most powerful lords in Westeros already. No, the North will fight for us because honor demands it, and because the alternative, allowing oath-breakers and usurpers to prosper, is unthinkable to them. You have more faith in northern honor than I do, Daemon said, but I hope you're right. There is one more matter. Corlys's voice dropped even lower, and Peter had to strain to hear. The Valyrian fleet is yours, ours, to command. But fleets require gold, and gold requires difficult decisions. Speak plainly. The Triarchy. Our old enemies in the Stepstones. Corlys paused. They have wealth beyond measure, and they have reason to hate King's Landing after what you and I did to their ambitions in the Narrow Sea. If we were to approach them to suggest an alliance, you want to ally with pirates and slavers? Daemon's voice was incredulous. The very men we spent years fighting. I want to win this war, Corlys said bluntly. The Triarchy controls trade routes we need. They have ships and soldiers and gold. Yes, they're pirates and slavers, but they're also pragmatists. They'll ally with us if it serves their interests, and we can use them to strangle King's Landing's trade while we attack from the air. Rhaenyra would never agree to this, which is why she doesn't need to know. Not yet. Not until the alliance is already made and proving its worth. We tell her after the fact, when the benefits are clear and undeniable. She can denounce the Triarchy publicly while we accept their aid privately. It's the kind of hypocrisy that every successful ruler must master. Daemon was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. You're a dangerous man, Lord Corlys. Far more dangerous than you appear. I'm a survivor, Prince Daemon, and I mean for us all to survive this war, whatever it takes. Very well, approach the Triarchy, if you think it wise, but do so carefully and tell no one else. If word reaches Rhaenyra before we're ready, I understand perfectly. This conversation never happened. None of these conversations happened. Daemon agreed. We are merely two lords who happened to meet in a hallway late at night, discussing nothing of consequence. Peter heard footsteps again, moving away this time. He waited several long minutes before emerging from his hiding place, his mind racing with everything he'd heard. Betrothals and alliances, pirates and promises. The careful manipulation of a queen who believed she was making her own decisions. He moved through the darkened corridors, heading toward his own small chamber. But before he reached it, he heard voices again, different voices this time, coming from a small antechamber near the library. Princess Rhaenys and Maester Gerardis, speaking in low tones. Peter couldn't help himself. He'd already eavesdropped on one forbidden conversation tonight. What was one more? He found another shadowed alcove and listened. Worry about her, Rhaenys was saying. She puts on a strong face, but she's grieving for her father, for her stolen throne, for the childhood friendship with Alicent that's been poisoned beyond repair. And now we ask her to send her sons into danger to make alliances that feel like selling herself piece by piece. The queen is stronger than she appears, Gerardis said gently. She has endured much and will endure more. But should she have to? Rhaenys' voice was pained. I know what it means to have your birthright stolen. I was passed over for the throne myself, remember? Because I was born a woman. Because men feared what it would mean to have a queen regnant. I see myself in her, Maester. I see the anger and the hurt and the determination to prove them all wrong, and you succeeded in your own way, Gerardis said. You married the sea snake, bore him children, built a life of meaning and purpose. You are called the queen who never was, but you have been queen in all but name small comfort when I watch my cousin's daughter prepare for war. Small comfort when I know that half the realm believes women are unfit to rule, and the other half is willing to slaughter two sands to prove it, one way or another. What would you have her do? Surrender? Bend the knee to Aegon and hope for mercy? No, Rhaenys' voice was firm. Never that. But I would have her understand the true cost of what we're attempting. Not just the cost in gold and men and dragons, but the cost to her soul. War changes people, Maester. It hardens them. Rhaenyra still believes she can win this war and remain the person she was before it started. She can't. None of us can. Perhaps that's the price of the crown, Gerardis said softly. To be changed by the pursuit of it, to become someone harder and colder and more ruthless. Every king and queen faces this transformation, and some are destroyed by it. Rhaenys sighed. I fear for her, Maester. I fear that in winning the throne, she will lose herself. And I fear that we, her council, her family, her advisors, are ushering her toward that fate because it serves our purposes. What choice do we have? None. That's what makes it tragic. Peter heard the rustle of fabric as one of them moved. I should retire, Rhaenys said. Tomorrow we continue planning this war that no one truly wants, but everyone seems determined to fight. The gods help us all. The gods have not been particularly helpful to House Targaryen in recent years, Gerardis observed. I suspect we're on our own. Their footsteps faded, leaving Peter alone in the darkness with his thoughts. He had heard too much tonight, learned too many secrets. The marriage alliances being arranged in shadow, the potential alliance with the Triarchy, the concerns about Rhaenyra's capacity to remain herself while pursuing victory. He thought about what he'd witnessed over these past days. The public councils where noble words were spoken about justice and rightful succession, and the private conversations where the real decisions were made, where pragmatism trumped principle, and the ends were used to justify any means necessary. This was how wars were truly fought. Peter realized, not just with swords and dragons, but with whispered promises and secret alliances, with marriages arranged and oaths conveniently forgotten. The Black Council spoke of honor and law in the daylight, but in the darkness, they plotted like any other ambitious lords grasping for power. Were they right to do so? Peter didn't know. He was just a scribe, a bastard with ink-stained fingers who happened to hear things he shouldn't, but he would record it all faithfully, would make sure that the true history of these days was preserved somewhere, even if it never saw the light of day. He made his way to his chamber at last and lit a candle. By its flickering light, he began to write, recording everything he'd heard. The words flowed from his pen, damning and true, a chronicle of ambition and compromise, of good intentions twisted by necessity into something darker. Outside, the dragons stirred in their lairs, their ancient dreams troubled by the scent of coming war. And in the castle above, lords and princes and queens plotted their strategies, each believing they knew the path to victory, each willing to sacrifice a little more of their honor with every passing day. The dance of the dragons would be remembered as a war of succession, a struggle between competing claims to the Iron Throne. But Peter knew the truth. It was a war of whispers and alliances, of marriages and betrayals, of good people making terrible choices because they believed the alternative was worse. History would judge them all. But first, they had to survive long enough to write it. Septa Marissa had served the faith of the Seven on Dragonstone for 12 years, tending to the spiritual needs of a household that paid lip service to the new gods while their hearts remained with the old Valyrian ways. She had made her peace with this contradiction long ago. The Targaryens were dragons after all, and dragons did not kneel easily to any god. But even dragons, she had learned, felt the weight of conscience. It was the 4th day since the Black Council had convened, and Septa Marissa had been summoned to the castle's small sept. The building was modest compared to the grand septs of King's Landing or Old Town, a simple stone structure with 7 walls and 7 altars, each dedicated to one aspect of the divine. The morning light filtered through narrow windows, casting pale rays across the worn flagstones. She found Princess Rhaenyra kneeling before the mother's altar, her silver gold hair unbound, wearing a simple grey gown rather than her usual finery. The princess's hands were clasped in prayer, but her eyes were open, staring at the painted image of the mother's face without truly seeing it. "Your Grace," Septa Marissa said softly, announcing her presence. "You sent for me." Rhaenyra did not turn. "Tell me, Septa, does the mother forgive those who send their children to war?" Marissa felt her heart clench. She moved closer, her robes whispering against the stone. "The mother understands a parent's pain, Your Grace. She knows that sometimes we must make choices that tear at our souls." "That is not what I asked." Rhaenyra's voice was steady, but Marissa heard the brittleness beneath it. "I asked if she forgives. My sons, Jacaerys and Lucerys, I'm sending them into danger. Jace to the north, Luke to Storm's End. They will fly on dragons, carry my words, represent my claim, and they may die doing so." Marissa knelt beside the princess, close enough to offer comfort, but not so close as to presume. "They are young men now, Your Grace. Prince Jacaerys is 5 and 10, nearly grown. In many houses, boys his age have already been knighted, have already fought in battles. He is still my son." Rhaenyra's hands tightened in her lap. They are both still my sons, no matter how tall they grow or how brave they pretend to be. And I'm sending them away because this cursed throne demands it, because politics and strategy require their sacrifice. Not sacrifice, Marissa said gently. Service. There is a difference, Your Grace. You are not sending them to die. You are sending them to fulfill their duties as princes, to serve the cause their grandfather died believing in. Rhaenyra turned to look at her then, and Marissa saw the tears the princess had been holding back. My father died believing I would be queen. He died believing the realm would honor his wishes, that the oath sworn to me would mean something. He was wrong about so much, Scepter. What if he was wrong about me as well? What if I am not strong enough for this? What if I am sending my sons to their deaths for nothing more than pride? Is it pride? Marissa asked. Or is it principle? You were named heir by your father the king. Every great lord in Westeros swore to uphold that succession. If we abandon principle whenever it becomes difficult or dangerous, what are we left with? Only naked power and the willingness to seize it. The Greens would say they act on principle as well, that a son should inherit before a daughter, that the natural order demands it. The Greens, Marissa said carefully, crowned Aegon in secret, without allowing you to be present at your father's deathbed, without giving you a chance to say farewell. They acted from ambition dressed up as principle. There is a difference, Your Grace, and the gods know it even if men do not. Rhaenyra was quiet for a long moment, her eyes returning to the mother's altar. Will you pray with me, Scepter, for my son's safety? I know the faith has little love for House Targaryen's dragons and their old Valyrian ways, but the mother loves all her children. Marissa interrupted gently. Dragon riders and shepherds alike, of course I will pray with you. They knelt together in silence, and Marissa led them through the traditional prayers, for protection, for wisdom, for the strength to do what was right, even when it was difficult. She could feel Rhaenyra's tension slowly easing, though it never fully left. Some burdens could not be prayed away, only endured. When they finished, Marissa helped the princess to her feet. Your Grace, if I may offer one more thought. Please, the cost of crowns is always high. Always. No king or queen has ever ruled without sacrifice, without making choices that haunt them in the quiet hours. But the measure of a ruler is not whether they avoid hard choices. It is whether they make those choices for the right reasons and carry the weight of them with grace. Rhaenyra smiled sadly. You make it sound almost noble. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it is simply necessary. But either way, it must be borne. Lord Celtigar found Prince Daemon on the eastern ramparts, staring out across the narrow sea toward where King's Landing lay beyond the horizon. The old lord's joints ached as he climbed the steps. Too many years, too many winters, too much time spent in damp castles by the sea. But duty called, and Celtigar had never been one to shirk his obligations. My prince, he said, announcing himself. I wondered if we might speak frankly. Daemon turned, his violet eyes assessing. When have you ever spoken any other way, Lord Celtigar? True enough. Celtigar moved to stand beside the prince, looking out over the grey waters. I wanted to discuss the matter of the Crown Lands Lords, those whose lands lie closest to King's Landing. They will be the first to face pressure from the Greens, the first to be forced to choose sides publicly. And Daemon's tone suggested he knew where this was going. And many of them are afraid, my prince. They have wives and children, castles that cannot withstand dragonfire, armies too small to matter in the grand scheme of this war. They swore oaths to Princess Rhaenyra years ago, but oaths are cold comfort when Varga circles overhead. You want me to reassure them? Promise them protection? I want you to be realistic with them, Celtigar said bluntly. Some of these houses will fall, their castles will burn, their lords will die. We cannot protect everyone, cannot be everywhere at once. The question is which houses we can afford to lose and which we must preserve at all costs. Daemon's expression hardened. You speak of men's lives as if they were pieces on a Sivas board. Because that is exactly what they are in this war. You know this as well as I do, Prince Daemon. We have 5 dragons we can deploy, soon to be more if the dragon seeds prove worthy. The Greens have 4, including the monstrous Vagar. We cannot protect every keep, every village, every loyal house. We must make choices. So we choose who lives and who dies, who deserves our protection and who we abandon to their fate. Yes, Celtigar's voice was firm. That is precisely what we do. It is cold and it is cruel, and it is the reality of war. The sooner we accept it, the more lives we can actually save. Daemon was quiet, his hands gripping the stone battlements. Which houses do you propose we abandon? The smallest ones, those with few men and little strategic value. We tell them to bend the knee to Aegon publicly, while supporting us in secret. Let them preserve their houses by appearing to submit, while they feed us information and sabotage the Greens' efforts from within. You want them to become oath-breakers and spies. I want them to survive, Celtigar said, and I want us to win. The 2 goals are not incompatible if we're clever about it. A lord who swears to Aegon but sends us intelligence about green movements is more valuable than a lord who declares for us openly and gets burned to ash within a fortnight. Daemon turned to face him fully. And what of honor? What of the oaths these men swore to Rhaenyra? Honor is a luxury for those who can afford it, Celtigar said. These small houses cannot afford it, not with Vargar hunting the skies. We give them permission to do what they must to survive, and we use their survival to our advantage. It is a kindness in its way. A kindness, Daemon's laugh, was bitter. You have an interesting definition of the word, Lord Celtigar. I have been playing this game since before you were born, my prince. I have seen houses rise and fall, seen kings come and go, seen wars that left nothing but ashes and regrets. If we are to win this war, if Queen Rhaenyra is to sit the Iron Throne, we must be willing to do what is necessary. All of it. Even the parts that make us sick to contemplate Daemon, studied the old lord for a long moment. You remind me of my brother Otto Hightower. He too believed that ends justified means, that power was worth any price. The difference, Celtigar said, is that I serve the rightful queen, not my own ambition. But yes, in terms of method, perhaps the hand and I are not so different. Politics requires a certain flexibility of conscience. I will consider your proposal, Daemon said, finally, but I make no promises. Rhaenyra must approve any such strategy, and she may not share your pragmatic outlook. Then we present it to her in terms she can accept. We frame it as protecting our smaller allies by allowing them to appear neutral. We emphasize that their intelligence will save lives in the long run. We make it palatable. You mean we lie to her about what we're really doing? Celtigar shrugged. We emphasize certain aspects and downplay others. It is what advisors do, my prince. We help our rulers make the hard choices by making them seem less hard. In the castle's lower levels, where the servants and lesser functionaries worked, a different kind of accounting was taking place. The castle's steward, a pragmatic man named Osric, had gathered his staff to discuss the realities of provisioning an army. Peter Longwaters sat in the corner, ostensibly checking inventories, but actually listening to everything being said. He had learned that servants often knew more about the true state of affairs than lords did. They were the ones who counted the grain sacks and the barrels of salt pork, who knew when supplies were running low and when promises exceeded resources. We have enough food to feed the current household for 6 months, Osric was saying, reading from a ledger. But if the Queen intends to host armies here, to feed soldiers and sailors and dragons, we'll need 10 times what we have, 20 times. The dragons alone eat more than the entire household combined, added the dragon keeper's assistant, a scarred man named Pate. Syrax needs 3 sheep a day when she's resting, 5 when she's been flying. Caraxes eats even more. And if we're claiming more dragons, if we're bringing in dragon seeds to attempt the bonding, then we'll need whole herds, Osric finished grimly. Which means buying from the mainland, which means exposing our supply ships to potential attack, which means this war is going to cost more than anyone is admitting, Petter said quietly. The men turned to look at him. Osric frowned. You're the scribe, aren't you? Lord Corlys's man. I am. And I've been listening to the council's discussions. They speak of dragons and armies and grand strategies, but they speak very little of how all of it will be paid for. Lord Corlys has wealth enough to fund an army, Pate said. Lord Corlys has spent years building his fortune through careful trade and calculated risks, Peter replied. War is neither careful nor calculated. Ships will be lost, trade routes disrupted, investments burned. The sea snake is wealthy, yes, but even he cannot fund a war indefinitely if it drags on. Osric sat down heavily. You're saying we might run out of money before we run out of enemies? I'm saying that wars are won not just by who has the most dragons, but by who can keep feeding their armies the longest. The Greens hold King's Landing and its treasury. They control the Reach, which produces most of the realm's food. They have the Westerlands and Lannister gold. We have dragons and determination. And the Velaryon fleet, Pate added, which requires sailors to be paid, ships to be maintained, supplies to be purchased, all of which costs gold. Peter looked around at the assembled servants. I'm not trying to be pessimistic. I'm trying to be realistic. If we're to win this war, we need to understand its true costs, not just in lives, but in resources. So what do? Osric asked. We do our jobs. We count every sack of grain, every barrel of ale, every sword and every nail. We make sure the council knows exactly what we have and what we need. And we pray that the lords making decisions upstairs understand that you cannot feed an army on pride and righteous indignation. A servant girl spoke up, her voice hesitant. My brother works in King's Landing, in the kitchens at the Red Keep. He sent word that the Greens are already feeling the strain. Queen Alysanne is demanding economies, cutting back on feasts and celebrations. They're worried about the cost too. Then perhaps this war will be won by whoever can endure poverty longest, Peter said. A fitting end to a conflict over who deserves a golden throne. The winner will be whoever is willing to starve for it That evening, Meister Gerardi sat in his chambers, surrounded by scrolls and books. He had been researching the previous civil wars in Westerosi history, trying to find lessons that might guide the current conflict. What he had found troubled him deeply. He was drafting a letter, not to be sent, perhaps never to be read by anyone but himself, attempting to put his concerns into words. The histories tell us that civil wars are the worst kind of conflicts, he wrote. In wars against foreign enemies, the realm can unite, can heal afterward and rebuild together. But in civil wars, brother fights brother, house against house. The wounds cut deeper because they are self-inflicted. The hatreds last longer because they are personal. He paused, considering his next words carefully. Princess Rhaenyra, Queen Rhaenyra, as she should be called, has the right of it in law and custom. Her claim is just, but justice and victory are not the same thing. She can be right and still lose. Or worse, she can be right and win, but at such cost that the victory is meaningless. I fear that in pursuing her rightful throne, she will destroy the very realm she seeks to rule. I fear that the price of crowns, in this case, may be measured not in gold, but in ashes and orphans and generations of bitter enmity. Yet what choice does she have? To surrender is to admit that might makes right, that oaths mean nothing, that ambition can overturn law whenever it proves convenient. If she bends the knee to Aegon, she sets a precedent that will haunt the realm for centuries, that promises can be broken, that women cannot rule, that the strong need not honor their commitments to the weak. So she fights. She must fight. And in fighting, she may save the principle of law while destroying the realm that law was meant to govern. Gerardi set down his quill and stared at the words he had written. This was the paradox at the heart of the conflict. Rhaenyra was right to fight, but the fight itself would cause immeasurable harm. She was justified in her claim, but pursuing that claim might make her into the very tyrant her enemies claimed she was. There was no good answer. There was only the terrible mathematics of war, lives weighed against principles, the present sacrificed for an uncertain future, the hope that somehow, impossibly, it would all be worth it in the end. He thought about the young princes flying north and south to secure alliances. He thought about the dragons being prepared for war. He thought about the thousands of soldiers who would march and fight and die, most of them having no real understanding of what they fought for beyond the commands of their lords. And he thought about Rhaenyra herself, kneeling in the sept, asking if the mother forgave those who sent their children to war. The gods offered no answers. Gerardis knew. They rarely did. Men made their choices and lived with the consequences, and the gods simply watched. He folded the letter carefully and placed it in a locked drawer with his other private writings. Perhaps someday, when the war was over and the final tallies had been made, someone would read these words and understand the price that had been paid. Or perhaps the letter would burn along with everything else, and future generations would never know the doubts and fears that plagued those who started this terrible dance. Either way, the dance would continue. The dragons would fly, and the realm would pay the price as it always did, in blood and tears and ashes. Outside, night fell over Dragonstone, and in the darkness, the castle prepared for war. The dawn broke grey and cold over Dragonstone on the 7th day since the council had first convened. Peter Longwaters stood at his usual post in the great hall, his writing tablet ready, his stylus sharp. He had witnessed every meeting, recorded every argument, watched as alliances were forged and strategies refined. Now, he sensed, the time for deliberation was ending. The time for action had come. The lords and advisers filed in with a different energy than in previous days. There was a finality to their movements, a sense of purpose that had been building throughout the week. Princess Rhaenyra entered last, and Peter noted immediately that she wore not mourning black, but red and black, the colours of House Targaryen, the colours of fire and blood. Upon her head sat the crown that had belonged to her father, King Viserys. It was a simple circlet of Valyrian steel, set with rubies that caught the morning light. She had not worn it before this moment, and its appearance now was a statement as clear as any words could be. "My lords," Rhaenyra said, her voice carrying through the hall, "we have spoken much these past days. We have debated strategies and counted dragons, made alliances and prepared for war. Now the time has come to transform words into action." She moved to the painted table, and the assembled council followed. Daemon stood at her right hand, Lord Corlys at her left. Princess Rhaenys, Maester Gerardis, Lord Celtigar, and the others formed a semicircle around the great map. "Before we finalize our plans," Rhaenyra continued, "I would hear from each of you one final time. Lord Corlys, what is the state of our fleet?" The sea snake stepped forward, his weathered hands coming to rest on the painted narrow sea. "Your Grace, the Valyrian fleet numbers more than 100 warships, with supplies and provisions sufficient for an extended campaign. We control the waters around Dragonstone absolutely, and we can extend that control to the gullet within days. Once we hold the gullet, nothing enters or leaves Blackwater Bay without our permission. King's Landing will starve," Daemon observed, with satisfaction. "Eventually, yes," Corlys agreed, "though it will take months, perhaps a year or more. The city is large and well provisioned, but the psychological impact will be immediate. The Greens will know they are besieged, that their trade is cut off, that every passing day sees them weaker and you stronger." "What of our potential allies?" Rhaenyra asked. Maester Gerardis summarized what we know. The Maester consulted his notes, though Petter suspected he knew the contents by heart. "Your Grace, the situation is as follows. The North will almost certainly declare for us. Lord Stark is young but honourable, and the oaths sworn by his father and grandfather bind him. Prince Jacaerys's mission should secure that alliance. The Vale is similarly disposed in our favour. Lady Jane Arryn has her own reasons to support a woman's right to rule. Princess Rhaenys' visit will cement that alliance. The Riverlands remain divided, but the Tullys are inclined toward us, and several river lords have sent quiet assurances of support. The Stormlands are uncertain. Much depends on Prince Lucerys' embassy to Storm's End. The Reach is largely hostile due to Hightower influence, though we may be able to peel away some houses. The Westerlands and their Lannister gold are firmly with the Greens. Dorne, as always, remains neutral and inscrutable." Rhaenyra nodded slowly, absorbing this. "So we have the North, the Vale, and much of the Riverlands. Possibly the Stormlands. Against us, the Reach and the Westerlands, plus King's Landing itself. And the dragons," Daemon added, "which may count for more than all the armies combined." "Speaking of dragons," Rhaenys said, "we need to discuss deployment. We have 5 dragons we can commit to battle immediately, 6 if we count young Joffrey's Tyraxes, though the boy is too young to ride into combat. The unclaimed dragons remain a possibility, but that is a gamble. A gamble we must take, Demon said firmly. We need every advantage. Vermithor alone, if we can find a rider for him, would be worth 1,000 swords. The dragon seeds have been summoned, Rhaenyra said. Those with Targaryen blood, however distant or bastard-born. They will begin attempting to claim the riderless dragons within the week. Some will succeed, many will die, but we cannot afford to leave such powerful weapons unused. Peter watched the faces around the table as this was discussed. He saw Lord Celtigar's distaste at the idea of bastards riding dragons, saw Corlys's pragmatic acceptance, saw Rhaenys's quiet concern for the lives that would be lost in the attempt. But no one argued against it. The need was too great, the stakes too high. There is one more matter we must address, Rhaenyra said, and her voice took on a formal quality that made everyone stand straighter. The matter of succession and legitimacy. Lord Corlys, you have proposed betrothals. The sea snake bowed his head. Your Grace, I propose that Prince Jacaerys be formally betrothed to my granddaughter Baela Targaryen, daughter of Prince Daemon and the late Lady Laena, and that Prince Lucerys be betrothed to my granddaughter Rhaena Targaryen. These matches would unite our houses more firmly and provide clear succession for the future. The matches are sound, Demon said. My daughters are of pure Targaryen blood on both sides. The betrothals answer any questions about the succession while strengthening our alliance with House Velaryon. Peter caught the delicate way Demon phrased it, the careful avoidance of speaking directly about the prince's true parentage. Everyone knew, but no one would say it aloud. The betrothals were a way of acknowledging the problem while solving it simultaneously. Political theatre of the highest order. I accept these betrothals, Rhaenyra said. Let it be recorded that Prince Jacaerys Velaryon, heir to the Iron Throne, is betrothed to Lady Baela Targaryen, and that Prince Lucerys Velaryon, heir to Driftmark, is betrothed to Lady Rhaena Targaryen. These marriages will take place after the war is won. After, Peter noted. Not if. Rhaenyra spoke with absolute confidence in victory, and whether she truly felt it, or was merely performing confidence for the council's benefit, the effect was the same. Now, Rhaenyra said, her hand moving across the painted table to rest on the carved red keep, we discuss our strategy. The Greens hold King's Landing and the Iron Throne. Our objective is to take both, to remove the usurper Aegon and his supporters, and to claim what is rightfully mine. The direct approach would be to fly to King's Landing with all our dragons and burn the city until they surrender, Daemon said. Quick, brutal, effective, and likely to kill tens of thousands of innocents, Rhaenys countered. The small folk of King's Landing had no say in Aegon's coronation. They should not pay for the Greens' treason with their lives. The small folk never have a say in anything, Demon said. Yet they always pay regardless. But we can minimize that cost, Rhaenyra said firmly. I will not be remembered as the queen who burned King's Landing to ash to claim her throne. We must be more strategic, more careful. We isolate the city. We secure our allies. We demonstrate our strength without needless slaughter. Lord Celtigar spoke up. Your Grace, if I may suggest a multi-pronged approach. We use the fleet to blockade King's Landing, cutting off their supplies. We send our dragon riders to secure our allies and harry the Green supporters, We use our ground forces to control key strategic locations. Harrenhal in the Riverlands, perhaps, or the Stormlands castles. We strangle them slowly rather than burning them quickly. A siege mentality, Corley said approvingly. The ceremony concluded, and the lords began to disperse each to their assigned tasks. The castle hummed with sudden activity, ships being provisioned, ravens being prepared, dragons being readied for flight. The war was no longer a possibility or a plan. It was happening now, real and irreversible. Peter remained in the great hall after most had left, organizing his notes, ensuring every detail was recorded. He looked up to find Maester Gerardi standing nearby, watching him work. "You have been diligent in your record-keeping, Master Longwaters," the master said quietly. "Someone should remember what truly happened here," Peter replied. "Not the version the victors will tell, but the real story. The doubts and the debates, the compromises and the costs. A dangerous occupation truth-telling Gerardi's observed, especially in times of war, perhaps. But if everyone only records what the powerful want remembered, then history becomes nothing but propaganda." Gerardi smiled sadly. "You are wiser than your years, Master Longwaters. Keep your notes well hidden. They may prove valuable someday, or they may prove fatal. It all depends on who wins." The master departed, leaving Peter alone with his thoughts and his tablet. He moved to the window and looked out over the castle courtyard. Below, he could see preparations underway. Dragons being led from their lairs, their scales gleaming in the afternoon sun, ships being loaded with supplies, soldiers drilling in the yard, practicing formations they would use in battles yet to come. And in the center of it all, standing on a balcony overlooking the scene, Queen Rhaenyra, in her crown and her black and red gown, watching her forces prepare for war. Even from this distance, Peter could see the set of her shoulders, the tilt of her head, determination and dread mixed in equal measure. She had claimed her throne today, or at least proclaimed her intention to claim it. But the true test would come in fire and blood in the skies above battlefields and the halls of contested castles. The Black Council had made its decision. The pieces had been set in motion. The dance was about to begin in earnest. Peter looked down at his tablet, at the pages and pages of notes he had accumulated over these 7 days. The full story of the Black Council, its deliberations, its schemes, its moments of doubt and determination. Someday, perhaps someone would read these words and understand not just what was decided, but why, not just the strategies, but the human costs. But that was for the future. For now, there was only the present moment pregnant with possibility and terror both. The dragons were stirring, the ships were sailing. The war had begun. Peter took up his stylus once more and wrote a final entry. On this 7th day, in the year 129 after Aegon's conquest, the Black Council concluded its deliberations. Queen Rhaenyra Targaryen, rightful heir to the Iron Throne, was crowned and acclaimed by her supporters. The lords swore their oaths anew. The dragons prepared for war, and the realm, unknowing, held its breath for the storm that was to come. History will remember this as the beginning of the Dance of the Dragons. Those of us who lived through it will remember it as the day we chose war over peace, principle over compromise, and the uncertain promise of justice over the certainty of continued tyranny. May the gods have mercy on us all. I fear we will need it before this is done. He set down his stylus and closed his tablet, Outside, the dragons roared, their voices echoing across the volcanic stone of Dragonstone. The sound carried across the water, a promise and a warning both. The dance had begun, and there would be no stopping it now.